everybody, and welcome into a special Sunday edition of the New England Sports Weekly Podcast. As always, I am your host, Sean Metcalf, and I am glad that you have decided to join me today as we kick off week number 10. Yes, folks, it's already in week 10, which is technically the start of the second half of the NFL season, is now that they have an 18 game season or a 17 game season with 18 weeks if you build in the bye there. So last week was the halfway point, was the end of the first half. This week is the start of half number 2 in the NFL season. So it's your special Sunday kickoff show, if you will, as we'll treat this more of like a Patriots pregame show. And we'll get into some other news here along the way from some other Boston sports, but this is going to be a heavily Patriots-focused broadcast right now, with breaking down last week's win in Carolina, talking about the controversy with Mac Jones. Was he dirty or not? So we'll get into all that, break down this week's game against Cleveland. But it's going to, like I said, it's a special Sunday edition of the New England Sports Weekly Podcast. And we'll jump into the out-of-the-box segment here. As we mentioned off the top of the show, the New England Patriots did go down to Carolina last weekend, and they beat Sam Darnold and the Carolina Panthers 24-6 in really not much of a entertaining game from the standpoint of offensive football. It's more the Patriots defense came out to play in that one. But the Patriots did look pretty good against another 4-4 team, albeit a 4-4 team that was going in a different direction instead of ascending like they were the first 3 weeks of the season. They have absolutely stubbed their toe here. They just do not look like the same Panthers, and it looks like the pumpkin of Sam Darnold. It looks like Sam Darnold's pumpkin has finally rotted out here. So it's hasn't been great for the Panthers over the last 4 or 5 weeks. And then the Patriots quarterback, Mac Jones, was accused by Brian Burns of the Panthers of being a dirty player, as he grabbed his ankle and twisted that ankle, and he was accusing him that he was doing it on purpose, that it wasn't because he was trying to stop him from recovering the fumble, and he accused him of being a dirty player, which I think is utter BS. I don't buy it at all. We'll get into that here in a moment as well. But that was an interesting storyline coming out of week number 9 for the Patriots. But I like I said, I totally think this has been blown out of proportion. We'll get into this here, but that was one of the big stories. And then the Patriots got roped into, I wouldn't say roped, but they got their names mentioned in probably the biggest story of the week. And that was Odell Beckham Jr., who asked for his release last Friday from the Browns. They were able to work something out. And by Wednesday, he was officially released from the Cleveland Browns. And nobody claimed him off waivers, so he officially became a free agent. And after he cleared waivers, I didn't think there was a chance the Patriots any serious chance the Patriots would get him. But from all the reports that were out there, the Patriots were pushing hard. There were serious interest, and it seemed like Odell Beckham might have thought about it at one point. So I don't think this was just purely smoke with no fire. There was some fire. Now, if this was like a 12 alarm raging fire, I don't know. It might have just been a small little one that Odell stomped out after he probably got some offers from some more serious contenders. But it was interesting to see that Odell actually was thinking about the Patriots and still had his respect for Bill, and maybe it wasn't just the Tom theory, because obviously the big thing was that Odell wanted to come to play for the Patriots back in the day, I think it was 2016 or whatever year, because mainly of Tom Brady. Now, obviously, I know that's probably about 95% of it, but still, at least that little sliver of him still has respect for Belichick. So there was a somewhat serious shot that it might have happened. But Odell ended up signing with the Los Angeles Rams. So that pipe dream did not come to fruition. We'll get into that here a little bit more as well. And the Patriots get prepared today to take on the Cleveland Browns, the Nick Chubb and Feltonless Browns. And of course, Kareem Hunt is still dealing with his injury, his calf strain. And that hurts me more in fantasy than it does in real life. And in real life, that's fine because I want the Patriots to win this one. But it was interesting to see that the Browns are down to D'Ernest Johnson now. He did have a good game against against the Denver Broncos a couple of weeks ago. I believe it was week 7 on a Thursday night football game. But again, I'm not going to put all my eggs into that one basket if I'm a Browns fan that he's going to duplicate that effort. But it will be interesting to see because the Patriots are also down Damian Harris, and Ramondre Stevens the official inactives won't be coming out for another 10, 15 minutes from now. So we'll try to monitor that and I'll let you know. But from all the reports, it seems like Ramondre Stevens, who was dealing with a concussion, did clear the protocol, will be playing this afternoon against Cleveland. So that will be a good sign here from the Patriots because he has looked in his limited his limited game time experience that he's gotten this year. He's looked pretty decent. And a pretty well worth 4th round pick that they've gotten. So that'll be interesting to see how Ramondre Stevens works in this week. And then on the baseball side of things, the Boston Red Sox did get some good news that they ended up getting JD Martinez back as he had 5 days after the World Series was over to pick up his player option. And I know this has been a split decision because some fans want Kyle Schwarber back and wanted him as the DH, but JD Martinez is officially back with the Boston Red Sox on the last year of his 5-year deal worth $19.5 million. So I think that's a good deal for the Boston Red Sox. We'll try to shoehorn that in here a little bit towards the end of the show. As I mentioned, it's going to be a heavily focused Patriots show. We'll sprinkle in a little Red Sox towards the end there. But that's some good news if you're the Red Sox and Red Sox fans. You get your all-world DH back. And then they also extended the qualifying offer to Eduardo Rodriguez, who, say what you want, he had a couple good playoff starts. Now, I'm hoping that he decides not to take the qualifying offer, that he ends up walking away and go in. And I wish the best for Erod, but hopefully he declines that $18.5 million option that he was extended. And I mean, I'm not going to be completely hurt if he takes it because, I mean, you do need pitching, but I think there's going to be some other avenues that you could look to go down with starting pitching. Now, like I said, I'm not entirely opposed to him coming back. Maybe you could work out some type of quote unquote long-term deal that's maybe a 3-year deal where you bring down the average value of 14, 15 million. I could swallow that a little bit more. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. The Red Sox also picked up the option. They also brought back Christian Vasquez at catcher, and they did not extend any qualifying offers to Martin Perez or Garrett Richards. Thank God. So we don't have to watch Garrett Richards bitch and moan about his being cold and not having a jacket, or him not being able to learn how to pitch again because, oh, God forbid, they take away illegal substances from you, Garrett. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out for the Red Sox and how they decide to go about building this rotation. It'll be an interesting offseason. But the Red Sox have started the process of building for next year. But there were some good decisions. And of course, we can't forget to mention that Kyle Schwarber has declined his player option. So he is officially a free agent, but he has mentioned that he would like to come back to Boston. So we'll try to talk a little bit about this later on in the show. But let's jump right into this. Let's get right into some football action here, folks. As Mac Jones and the New England Patriots took on the Carolina Panthers last week, as we mentioned, that they won 24-6. And it was mainly a defensive battle, which that actually kind of gives me a little bit of comfort here as well. I know I would have liked to see more out of Mac and seen more offense in this game, but I honestly, I am not upset about what I've seen out of the defense here recently, just because early in the season, those first 4 weeks of the season, minus the Tampa Bay game, the defense looked blah. They looked bland. It was not great, not what was advertised outside of Matthew Judon. Matthew Judon was the one free agent that they brought in who was basically where you felt comfortable with this whole situation. So he played like he's like you're used to seeing with Matthew Judon. But the rest of the defense, even guys like Josh Uche, hasn't been the same. The rest of the defense just has been lackluster. But now you started to see the secondary, which was the biggest disappointment probably all season long, has come roaring back, especially that and J.C. Jackson, who had that pick six last week against the Panthers. And J.C. Jackson is really, really impressing me. Now, I don't know if they'll end up going and giving him that mega contract like he probably wants at this point, but it's encouraging to see that he's starting to come around and he's leading the team in interceptions. Like I mentioned, had the big pick six that really turned that game around and pretty much salted that one away against the Panthers. So it's been nice to see that the defense is picking up the slack, because of course now you have to play some better teams here coming down the stretch. Starting today with the Cleveland Browns. Yes, I know they don't have Nick Chubb today, but still Baker Mayfield is a solid quarterback, and you have to worry about Jarvis Landry and the rest of this Cleveland offense. Jonathan Peoples-Jones is a name that not a lot of people know about, but he has been a solid young receiver that is starting to make some noise for them. So it could be interesting. And then, of course, you have to face the Buffalo Bills twice, once on Monday Night Football coming up here in, I believe, about 4 weeks, 3-4 weeks. And then you have to face them in Buffalo later on late in the season. Plus, you have to play the Colts, who are starting to come around now. Carson Wentz looks pretty good now. So you have some good games here coming down the stretch where you're gonna need this defense to step up, especially Buffalo, because that's the one. Those two games are going to be so critical now with the Patriots right in the thick of the playoff race, where maybe 3 weeks ago it didn't look like they might. It looks like they might miss out on the playoffs, but now with how wide open this playoff race is in the AFC, it's good to see them, especially, like I said, on the defensive side of the ball, to see them starting to play well. And how can I forget, they play Tennessee the Sunday after Thanksgiving. So they have really stiff competition, because if you take a quick look at it, today they play Cleveland, then they have a quick turnaround and they have to go down to Atlanta to play the Falcons, who admittedly they have been bad for most of the year, but they are 4-4, but they are without Calvin Ridley. We'll talk a little bit about that later on, but it'll be interesting, as we'll talk about that on Wednesday's show, and we'll get back on track to a regular week. But anyways, they have Atlanta, who's not going to be a pushover, but it's not going to be your Cleveland's, Tennessee's, or Buffalo. So again, you're at home against Cleveland, you're on the road against Atlanta, you're at home against Tennessee, and then comes the Monday night game. Actually, this is the one that's in Buffalo. My apologies. Then you're in Buffalo, then you go on the road to Indy, and then the Sunday after Christmas, you are at home against Buffalo, and then you finish out the season against Jacksonville. So, and then you, my apologies. Then you finish out against Jacksonville and Miami. So here's your tough stretch where you have to really going to have to show your worth here, because you have Cleveland without Nick Chubb, so you get a gift there. Then you go to Atlanta, where that's not a cakewalk, but not any real tough competition. Then you have Tennessee, who lost Derrick Henry. Then you have Buffalo, the 2 games against Buffalo, and then Indy. So this is really where you're going to have to steal a couple games here, especially one against Buffalo. But anyways, getting sidetracked here a little bit, as it was nice to see New England's defense come out, play pretty well against a team that, yeah, I know Sam Darnold was the quarterback for the Carolina Panthers, but you still had Christian McCaffrey, who made his comeback as he missed the last 3 or 4 weeks with Carolina. And we all know how good Christian McCaffrey is. He's right there with Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook for the best running back in the league. He's a weapon. He is absolutely amazing. He is basically a real life version of like you cranking somebody up to 99 on Madden. He can run for over 1,000 yards, catch for over 1,000 yards, is athletic as hell. So you had a running back which you pretty much held in check. And then you ended up having DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. So if you had a more stable quarterback, let's put it that way, then you probably would have had a more stiff competition in that game, and you might have actually really been fighting for a victory last week against Carolina, because really Carolina, the only thing that they did was get 2 field goals on 2 Patriots turnovers. So really, if the Patriots didn't turn the ball over, Carolina probably doesn't score in this game at all. And it's a 24-0 win if New England doesn't shoot themselves in the foot twice. But I mean, you had Sam Darnold over there at quarterback. So, I mean, it's really not going to intimidate anybody over there, because just seeing Sam Darnold twice a year with the Jets before he got traded to Carolina, you just knew he was going to end up crapping his pants eventually at one point or another. And he did multiple times throwing that pick six. So anyways, the defense is starting to come around. So that, to me, bodes well when you face these other teams. Tennessee without Derrick Henry, I feel more comfortable with, because now that they've lost Julio Jones, he's on IR for at least 3 weeks. So that 3 weeks puts him square in the realm of missing the New England game, because as we mentioned, that would be actually week number 2 or week 3. So he has to miss minimum of 3 weeks. So, I mean, obviously you have A.J. Brown there, so that's going to be a tough one, because we all know how good A.J. Brown, and he should have been a New England Patriot, because he was my favorite wide receiver in that group. It was, to me, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, and I know at the time I would have said N'Keal Harry, but we all know that one's busted out really bad. So, but the point being is I really loved A.J. Brown. He's panned out to be a stud wide receiver. So even without Julio, you're going to have to worry about him. But again, no Derrick Henry, so that's going to be easier test for the Patriots. And then Buffalo has not looked great. They've hit the skids here lately. So it'll be interesting to see how things shape out going down the stretch here. But it's looking a little bit better for the Patriots, with teams that were ahead of them in the division, ahead of them in the wild card race, all have pretty much kind of had some major injuries to key players on their staff, superstars on their team, or they've just, for some reason or another, have just hit the skids. But that was the encouraging part. Last week, Mac Jones didn't have his greatest game. He's hit a little bit of a plateau here. He hasn't really progressed over the last couple of weeks like you thought he might, facing some of these lower level teams. I shouldn't say Carolina a lower level team defensively, because they actually have a pretty good defense, but I thought he might have a better game last week. I thought he might have another 300-yard performance, 2 touchdowns, but that wasn't to be last week. It was more of the running backs, who we'll touch on here when we break down the Cleveland game. But it really wasn't what I thought I was going to see out of Mac. Now, he didn't play bad at all. He just played steady, didn't really play great enough for you to win. Let the defense do their job. And it's honestly what's happening now with how this offense is playing when it's kind of more run-based. Mac Jones is taking care of the ball. He really hasn't had an explosive game here on offense. This reminds me a lot of 2001, and it's eerie. And if you take a look at a lot of these stats out there, the Patriots are 5-4 after 9 weeks, which they were in 2001 as well. And then Mac Jones has, I believe, the same amount of touchdowns and picks as Brady had, or he's on pace for the same amount of touchdowns and interceptions, because Brady ended up with 18 touchdowns, 10 interceptions in 2001. So it's really, really weird because like I said, they have the same win-loss record at this time. They're basically kind of, you can't say the same record because you have one more game, but basically what it would equivocate to, if you really want to look at it that way, as far as what they're on pace for. And offensively, they're just taking care of the ball. They're really not a juggernaut on offense. And defensively, the defense is starting to carry them like they did in 2001. And I believe the amount of points, they're actually giving up, at this point, I think it's 270 points that they've given up. In 2001, it was 271. So, it actually is eerily similar to what they did in 2001. So, and I'm not going to say they're going to have the same end results, because I think this year the NFC is so strong. Now, I know in 2001 you could say, well, it's the greatest show on turf. They were going to blow out the Patriots. Let's pump the brakes here. I'm not going to say they're going to go that far, folks, but because I thought this was a fringe wild card team to start the season, and I don't think they're fringe any longer just because of how bad the rest of the AFC is, but it really is shaping up to be really interesting to see how far the Patriots can go here in the playoffs. I think they might be able to win the first round, do some damage in that second game, and maybe fight for the AFC Championship game, but that's asking a lot. But they are really, really impressing me with how things are going this year. It's just, as far as this last 4 or 5 weeks, after what it looked like they were kind of stale and didn't have anything really going for them outside of Mac Jones. Mac Jones was the only bright spot, it seemed, and now everything is starting to piece together and starting to click here. So as we wrap up kind of the Carolina game here, one of the other notes to come out of this was the Mac Jones ankle grab or twist of Brian Burns, the defensive end for the Panthers. Now, I've seen the replay, I don't know how many times now, 1 million times it seems like. But I do not think he did this on purpose, that he went and purposely twisted the ankle. Yeah, call me whatever you want, call me a homer, blah, 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 blah. But honestly, you're in the middle of a play and you're trying to stop the defensive lineman from grabbing the football, grabbing the fumble, or if he did, you're trying to tackle him. And Matt came out and said that that's basically, it was in the heat of things. He thought he had the ball. And I know some people will come out and be like, well, it was 5 seconds, 6 seconds, whatever, 8 seconds later on. And how can you not know, blah, 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 blah. They were getting all butthurt about it, which just makes me laugh, one, because it's like, you're in the middle of a play. How do you not know? I mean, how at that time are you going to have all of your wherewithal? Because you're on the ground, you're tussling around, you just got strip sacked, you're probably have a little bit of panic going on, like, oh, I'm trying to recover the ball. Oh, no, it's there. I'm trying to grab them. And the other part of this is that if you're the defender, and if you've played even pee-wee football, high school football, whatever it is, like once you kind of get tackled, or if somebody's trying to tackle you and you're kind of in that scrum, somebody's just going to try to grab and pull at whatever. And if you get grabbed by the ankle, your first kind of thought is to start to grab, not to grab, but to pull and twist your ankle to try to get out of it. And things happen. And to me, that's all that really happened. It was just kind of an accident where something just freakishly happened where he ends up getting hurt. And And the part that made me laugh about this is because now he wants Mac to apologize. He came out today, or not today, but he came out later this week, and he told his fellow defensive lineman happy hunting, putting out a basically a warrant, or like a a bounty. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Not a warrant, but a bounty out on Mac Jones' head for all the rest of the defensive linemen to go tackle him because he did something so egregious, so dirty. But it's, to me, what makes me laugh about the whole situation is that he went in, he got hurt so bad that he went back in for the remainder of that game after he missed maybe, like, I don't know, a couple plays, a series, and played the remaining 2 quarters of that game. So it's like, dude, you're not even that hurt. You're not even that butthurt about it. You as a defender probably have done things that are way dirtier than that. So shut the hell up. You sound like a little baby. You sound like a little bitch that's just crying about something that, like, oh, my ankle got hurt. It's like, dude, you were fine enough to play the rest of the game. And that's not I've seen way dirtier things in football. So even if Mac intentionally did this, I wouldn't even care because it's not even that damn dirty. And the NFL didn't even do anything about it. It's not like they went and suspended him, fined him for anything like that. So it's just like, dude, you're crying about spilt milk. You sound like a little bitch. Shut the hell up and just go out there and play football. You sound ridiculous right now. And it just made me laugh about the whole situation because it's, to me, to hear a defender crying about a quarterback, and then for the rest of, like, the NFL media outside of New England to kind of pick it up, and like down in Carolina, everybody's like calling for him and calling for his head and stuff, like, oh, this is unacceptable, blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, are we that soft now in football that, like, grabbing somebody's ankle while they're in a pile, that's so egregious now? It's like, dude, he thought he had the frigging football after Mac Jones after he fumbled it. He's just trying to keep him from advancing it 20 yards down the field. He's doing his goddamn job. It's like, why are we so butthurt about this? That's just what I don't get. It's like, why are we so upset? Why are we so worried about this? It's like Mac played it the way he's supposed to. So I don't know. It's just it doesn't bother me, and it's just makes me laugh that the Panthers are so concerned about this. It's like, don't you have a week 10 game to worry about here other than last week against the Patriots and Mac Jones? So, like, just shut up and go out and play football and stop worrying about something that wasn't really that dirty after all. So I don't know. It just makes me laugh, and it's just one of those situations where you got to kind of sit back and kick your feet up and be like, yeah, well, whatever. We moved on. We got the win, and actually the best part about this all is that they brought it up to Mac, and Mac really was like, now we got a game to go to worry about this week. He didn't really care. He didn't give a shit about it. He was like, he's not apologizing after they asked him about the apology. So he knows that this is kind of like a joke. So I love Mac's response to it. So that's to me, that was like the other part 1B to it that I really loved, was that when he got asked about it, it's nope. Don't really have much to say. We just got another game to go on for, because he knows this is a joke. But that was the big story / non-story for me this week that I just could not help but laugh at. It's like, you're an NFL player, you're a defensive player, you're a big bad defensive lineman, and you're crying about this. Well, we see why you guys are going downhill down there in Carolina. You started off 3-0, and now you're 4-5. So have fun with that. And oh yeah, guess what? You get Cam Newton back, and I'm sure you guys are so excited. I can't believe he has a job again. Oh my God! And they paid him, and they guaranteed him $4.5 million, and he has a chance to earn over $10 million. It's like, did you guys not pay attention his last 2-3 years in Carolina when he was with you guys? And oh yeah, by the way, did you not watch last year in New England when he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn most of the time when he was throwing the football? If he was that good, the Patriots would probably still have him on their roster. But no, they were like, oh yeah, we have this rookie who's awesome. We're gonna go with him. So That was the part this week. That was the other big note there that happened in the NFL. And oh my, as soon as that story came out, as soon as I saw the rumors and when it became official, I'm just like, and the money that they paid him is the part that I just could not believe. They're giving him 4.5 million guaranteed for him being so awful the last couple of years. I don't get it. I don't at all. We're not talking 2015 Cam Newton who won the MVP award. No, we're talking about Cam Newton who barely had enough skill left to have a starting job the last couple of years, who the only offer he got was New England until Carolina came crawling back to him after Sam Darnold has sucked so bad. And that tells you that they don't want to go with PJ Walker. So it's just, oh man, I'm glad I'm not a Carolina fan because this is pretty pathetic. But sorry, we were talking about Carolina, and I just couldn't let that go without talking about that. But the Patriots, as Mac Jones had mentioned in his press conference, are on to Cleveland, and so are we. Now, as we mentioned earlier, Cleveland is without Nick Chubb, without Kareem Hunt. Odell Beckham Jr. was cut, and he's now in Los Angeles. Baker Mayfield has one shoulder, at least it's his throwing shoulder. Now, the funny thing is that last week, they did have Nick Chubb, but last week without Odell after they cut him, Baker actually played pretty well, was able to spread the ball around. So maybe Baker feels a little bit more freed. But the part that, if I'm the Cleveland Browns, that worries me more is that you're without Nick Chubb, who, by the way, why didn't the Patriots draft him? I wanted him over Sony Michel. I know a million people have probably said this, but I remember watching him in Georgia in school and I'm like, ooh, this guy's special. And then I do remember Sony Michel in that national championship in the playoff run. He was really good, but I wanted Nick Chubb more than I wanted Sony Michel. And oh man, it just pains me to see him and not be like, he should have been a Patriot. I mean, I think Damian Harris is a good running back, better than Sony Michel. I like Damian, but I mean, Nick Chubb to me is special, and he should have been the 31st overall pick for the New England Patriots that year, and or 32nd, and it just pains me just to see him doing so well with the Browns, and he should have been a Patriot. But nonetheless, back to reality here. Nick Chubb is now out of this game, ruled out with COVID. He was not able to get his back-to-back negative tests in time. And then Kareem Hunt is dealing with an with a hamstring injury. And now they're left to DeForest Johnson, not Deontay Johnson. I'll have to look it up here. It's one of those names where I just keep on messing it up. But anyways, they're left with their third string running back, who he's pretty. I mean, he had a good game against the Denver Broncos, who are one of the. I believe they're number 3 in rush defense in the NFL. So they're not D'Ernest. My apologies, D'Ernest. So D'Ernest Johnson had over 146 yards and a touchdown on that Thursday night game. But again, there's a reason that you're not starting for anybody else, that you're a number 3 running back. And I know Cleveland is a different story because they have Kareem Hunt is their backup, and he would be a starter pretty much anywhere else besides Tennessee, New Orleans, and Carolina, basically, and in Minnesota. So unless you have one of those special running backs, he's pretty much going to be your number 1 anywhere else. And until both of them have been hurt here recently, both Chubb and Hunt were on pace to both have over 1,000 yards on the season. But D'Ernest Johnson isn't anything to sneeze at, as I sniffle here, ironically. But I don't think he's going to repeat that Thursday night football game, but I think he'll have a solid game, have about 75 yards rushing, punch it in once, maybe catch a ball or two here or there. But this is something where I really do like. I don't think Cleveland is going to be as potent on offense because you don't have Nick Chubb here, who to me was, like I said, he's probably a top 5, top 8 back in the league. He's that special. You don't have him. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Baker Mayfield is dealing with a shoulder injury, albeit not to his non-throwing shoulder, but still, it's an injury that he did have to miss a little bit of time here. Going back to that Thursday night football game where Ernest Johnson had a big game, that was also the game where Case Keenum had to come in. So basically, when we're looking here at Cleveland from the New England perspective, they don't have a lot of their playmakers, but Cleveland last week without Odell, they were able to spread the ball around with the passing attack. And they still have Jarvis Landry, who is still a very good wide receiver in the NFL, but not anywhere near what Odell is. But still, they have enough weapons there. They have some good tight ends in David Njoku and Austin Hooper. And the one weapon that you can't forget about today is going to be Donovan Peoples-Jones, the former Michigan product, who was a highly recruited 5-star prospect there in Michigan, had dealt with some injuries, but the talent is there. And he was the guy that actually I was hoping last year that the Patriots might actually take in the 6th or 7th round there, because he's a bigger body set. He's got some skills. He's got some speed, but he might be one of those late round steals that Cleveland has that actually turns into a pretty productive, maybe their version of Julian Edelman, a late round receiver that has a pretty solid NFL career in Donovan Peoples-Jones. So he's somebody that you can't forget about. Now, am I going to say he's going to have an Edelman-like game? No, but he's had a couple decent games this year. So he's a guy that you can't just be like, oh, Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's in this game. Okay, man, no, don't worry about it. No, you have with he and Landry, both Landry and Donovan Peoples-Jones and Rashad Higgins at times can contribute. So it's a solid receiving core, not a great receiving core, but it's maybe just a step above what the Patriots have. So you can't just forget about them. But to me, it's going to be a lot harder for Cleveland to score in this one because the Patriots, as we mentioned, their defense lately has really turned things around here. They've really become a good, solid defensive unit, and especially the secondary, which at times early in the year looked like they had some really bad problems, especially in that Dallas game. They got torched against Dak Prescott. Now, surprisingly, a couple weeks before, they actually played decent against Tom Brady, so go figure. But really, up until that Dallas game was the last game where you were like, oh, that's so for 6 weeks, you had a secondary that just looked porous at times. And Jalen Mills, who I'm still not going to crown anything on. He's still not anybody I want to build around in my secondary, but he has turned things around here, and he has become a solid piece. Somebody that you can be like, okay, we can put him out there. He knows what's going on. He's going to get beat from time to time. He's not a stud, but he can go out there and you feel okay with it. Not great about it, but you feel okay that he's out there. He's not going to get lost. He'll get beat from time to time. But you have J.C. Jackson out there. Devin McCourty is starting to turn things. I thought maybe he looked a little long in the tooth, but he started to come around again. He's still got a little left in the tank. And then, of course, their other safeties that they have in Adrian Phillips and Kyle Duggar, they have some pretty good safeties there that are behind McCourty and in that free safety spot. So they've started to turn around playing more zone defense, despite what Bill Belichick's son, Stephen Belichick, wants to say, the de facto defensive coordinator, that no, we're playing more. No, that might be what it seems. And no, it's more. We're playing more man, and we're playing zone, and I sound kind of like my father when I kind of talk like this. So it's, by the way, it's eerily similar how they sound alike. It's cadence wise too. So it's weird when I listened to it this morning with him talking about it. It's creepily eerie. But to me, it's going to be interesting to see how things go with the Cleveland Browns, how they play Cleveland without Odell. You're probably still going to play more of that zone to kind of keeps Donovan Peoples-Jones, who has some speed, in front of you. I would, because now you don't have Jonathan Jones, who's out for the year. So be interesting to see how they treat Jarvis Landry. If you put J.C. Jackson, who that's probably, I would have him shadow Landry the whole day, at least for a majority of it. And maybe you put Jalen Mills, or you put a safety on him, or you put Jalen Mills with some safety help with him during the day. But honestly, though, there's not that one weapon that I'm like, oh boy, you have to devote J.C. Jackson or somebody with a lot of help to him. So I think this is where you're going to find a little bit more zone defense here for the Patriots, because now you don't have Nick Chubb, who that's their centerpiece on the offense. He's out. Yes, they have Ernest Johnson, who had a big game a couple Thursdays ago, but he really, I just don't think he's going to be capable of doing like another 150-yard performance here. I think he'll have a solid day, but I don't think he's going to have this all-world day again like he did that Thursday night. So Belichick usually tries to take out your best player, and right now, to me, your best player is Jarvis Landry, who I'm not all that psyched about, who I'm all, if I'm Cleveland, that I'm all like, oh, okay, this is our go-to weapon. This is the number one weapon that we have to work with. I think it's going to be more of them spreading the ball out, which seemed to work last week. But again, that's when they had Nick Chubb that they could really rely on, and the passing attack wasn't the number one thing going for him. So I still think it's going to be a hard-fought game, because it's not, because if you look over to the Patriots side of the football, this is where it's going to be interesting, because they lost Damian Harris because he's dealing with some head issues, some concussion issues, just like Ramondre Stevens was. So you don't have your best running back either. Now, the thing with the Patriots, though, is that they do have Ramondre Stevens, the rookie running back out of Oklahoma, who in his limited time has actually played pretty well. And actually last week, he was kind of outplaying, in my opinion, he was outplaying Damian Harris, who, don't get me wrong, I love Damian Harris, but Ramondre Stevens, who we did learn is officially active for today's game just a few moments ago, he last week had 10 touches for 62 yards, no touchdowns, and then 2 more receptions for 44 yards. So he had 96 yards of total offense on the day. And he's had a couple other good games there. Back against Dallas, he only had 23 yards rushing and 1 touchdown, but he had 3 receptions for 39 yards. So this is a guy that a lot of people kind of going into the season, especially when the Patriots drafted him, I was like, okay, this will be your power back. And then obviously they ended up trading Sony Michel. So it's like, okay, so maybe they think more about him than we all thought. And he has proven to me that he's not just your big thumper a la LeGarrette Blount, because he's bigger in that mold, but he does have some sneaky, quick, small, quick space moves, and he's able to catch the ball effectively for a guy of his size. And I think that's even more of a put down too, because when you say a guy of his size, because he actually receives it pretty well. Last week he had a 41-yard reception in that game, or 40 plus yard reception. So he can catch the ball and make guys miss when he gets in the open field. So this is a guy, now do I think he's going to end up being like a top 5 running back in the league and take over Damian Harris's position? No, but this is a guy that is definitely, when Damian Harris is there, they form a nice 1-2 punch. And even if you have to rely on as your lead back for a couple weeks, I think he's a pretty good running back, where I think he can be a pretty solid guy, get you 80 plus yards on the ground, get a touchdown or 2, then also catch another couple balls and get 30, 40 plus yards receiving. So if you're looking at a guy with probably over 110, 120 yards of total offense on the ground, that's nothing to sneeze at all. So I think this is a guy that it's not going to be as big a drop off as it is for Cleveland when they lose Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt in the backfield. So I think the Patriots are in a better position. Now, obviously, with Ramondre Stevens having a concussion and just getting cleared of it, and now he's active, there's going to be a situation to monitor. Do they give him 15, 20 touches in this game? Or do you split it a little bit more evenly with Brandon Bolden and J.J. Taylor? I think you're not going to see like a huge workhorse load, but I think you'll see a decent amount, maybe like 10 to 13 carries in this game for Ramondre Stevens, just because out of lack of necessity. And then you'll see Brandon Bolden with probably another 10, J.J. Taylor with probably about 5 carries in this game. So it's not going to be this whole 25 plus carries for Ramondre. I think you'll see probably a maximum at like 13, 14 carries. Unless obviously he starts going off and it's like, all right, hot hand, we got to play it. And from that standpoint, then that's where I think you can really obviously feel good about it. But I just think from running wise, you have to feel better about the Patriots because they have their number 2 instead of with the Browns when you're left with your number 3, number 4 running back in this game. Now, this is one where I think Mac Jones is going to be forced to throw the ball a little bit more because running up the middle where the Patriots like to go, they're really not a sideline, that lateral rushing team. They like to go up the middle. This is where Cleveland really excels, is playing rush defense up the middle. So it'll be interesting to see how the Patriots try to handle this here. But I think this is where Patriots have minimal marginal success rushing the ball, have about like 80 yards rushing, 90, well, probably like 80 to 90 to 100, somewhere in that 80 to 100 yard total on the ground. It's not going to be a huge day rushing the football altogether with all their running backs. But this is more where Mac Jones is going to have to air this out against his defense, and they'll probably have to have a tight end stay in there and help chip Myles Garrett. But I think this is where I think you're going to see a big game from Jacoby Myers and Kendrick Bourne and then Hunter Henry. So this is where those 3 guys I think are going to be your key 3 guys that you can lean on here for this game, just because just out of necessity, I just don't think Cleveland's going to let them run wild on them like the Patriots have been over the past couple of weeks against some of these teams like the Chargers and the Carolina Panthers. So to me, this really comes down to Mac kind of getting over that plateau, and hopefully he doesn't have that rookie wall type of game where he's able to make those key throws on those key times, get a big play or 2 from. Hopefully you have Nelson Aguilar show up and catch another big bomb down the sideline like you did a couple weeks ago against the Chargers early in that game, get you in good field position, and then work it down to your 2 tight ends, which hopefully maybe you can see Jonnu Smith actually show up here because that would be nice. Other than that, Jonnu Smith he had 1 decent game against the Jets, and ever since that, it's just been blah. Nothing at all, really. So it's been interesting to see. But I think this is where the Patriots are really able to use their defense is going to win them this game again. There's going to be another big defensive effort where they're without Nick Chubb, they're able to really hone in on that Cleveland passing attack and really hold them down for the day, where the Patriots on offense do have their second running back, who I think has some good traits. He'll have a decent day on the ground, not a great day, but a decent day. And this is where I think Mac Jones, maybe he doesn't have like a 400-yard passing game, but he makes those key passes in those key situations where I think the Patriots end up winning this game 24-17 against Cleveland, where they take that late lead. I just don't think Cleveland has enough firepower offensively right now without Nick Chubb. If they had Nick Chubb, then I might lean more towards Cleveland in this one. But right now, as it stands, I am definitely going to go. Right now, I'm going to go with New England to take this game and move on to 6-4 and really strengthen their playoff hopes here. As we talked about earlier in the show, this is a wide open AFC this year. You look at Baltimore, they're the one team that you're like, oh, Baltimore and Tennessee. Now, I know Tennessee just by default really has the easiest ride to it here because the rest of that AFC South, even as good as the Colts have looked the last couple of weeks, still the Titans got the one victory so far in their season series against the Colts, so they have that wider margin of error that they have. But without Derrick Henry, it's going to be difficult for them to maintain a lot of this here. They probably won't get Derrick Henry back at minimum until the first round of the playoffs, if they're lucky. But right now, it's like I said, it's wide open for me. It's the top two teams are Baltimore and Tennessee. But then after that, Kansas City looks awful on offense, even though they still have all their weapons. It's not like they're missing somebody else. And I won't even put Clyde Edwards-Helaire in there just because he's been a disappointment for me anyways. He hasn't been what I think they got sold a bill of goods there with Edwards-Helaire. But really, to me, there's no one even the top two teams, even they're not teams that I'm like, oh, they're going to run away with the AFC. It's really this is one of the few years over the last like 15 years that I've really been like, okay, the AFC is up for grabs. There's no really dominant team. I mean, like the team that's going to be 15-2, 14-3, and absolutely run away with the AFC. I don't think that's going to happen this year. I mean, maybe, who knows, maybe Baltimore or Tennessee proves me wrong, but I just don't think, especially with all the injuries, like we mentioned, no Derrick Henry for a long time, and no Julio Jones as well there in Tennessee, and the excuse me there. Oh man, I had started to have like a frog in my throat. Oh man, that was that was not good. And then with Kansas City not playing the way that they're used to, not playing well, and then the absolute dumpster fire that there's been with key injuries. It's just I just don't think it's going to be anybody just running away with this. Even Buffalo has looked bad. They lost to the friggin' Jacksonville Jaguars. Let that sink in. They lost to the Jaguars. Oh my God, people. That is pathetic. So we'll see how it goes here for the Patriots down the stretch. But I think they'll end up winning this one today, and I think they'll strengthen their playoff picture here, and they'll be well on their way to earning a victory. So we'll just squeeze a little bit of Red Sox talk here as we start to wrap up the show. But as we mentioned, JD Martinez has picked up his player option, so I think this will be a good signing for the Red Sox. I know some people were disappointed because they wanted Kyle Schwarber back as the full-time DH. This is where I got to tell people to pump the brakes here a little bit, because we all forget JD Martinez, when he came here in 2018, remember that year in between when David Ortiz retired and before JD came in 2017, they didn't have that middle of the order bat. Now, obviously now you could be like, oh, I think Rafael Devers is 1B, 1A to JD Martinez in the middle of that order, and so isn't Xander Bogaerts. But as I'm talking about, like that true 40 home run, 120 run RBI, hit over 300, you just can't pitch to him or else he's going to make you pay. That's what JD Martinez is. He's developed to that in his career. Yeah, it took him a while. We don't look, because he hasn't been that for 15, 20 years in the league. He's been that since 2014, 7, 8 years in the league. But this is a man that I think everybody forgets that he's a better hitter than Schwarber, because, yes, Schwarber has immense power. He has a lot of power, don't get me wrong. And he had that tear here in June with the Nats. But we all forget that JD Martinez, when he first came to Boston, hit over 300. I believe it was like 315, 320. Had 43 home runs, drove in over 130 runs in his first year. And then in 2019, he hit 35 home runs and hit just over 300 and drove in over 110 plus runs. oh no, that's such a disappointment. And then 2020, we all know how that kind of went. I think he kind of nailed it in there, which, I mean, I would have too with that pitching staff that they had, to be honest. Nobody was going anywhere with that 2020 Red Sox pitching staff. But then this year, I know people want to say he had a down year, but he hit it was 289 or 298 with 28 home runs and 99 RBIs. Oh my God, that's so bad. That's so horrible, folks, that he was 2 home runs shy of 30 and 1 RBI shy of 100. Oh my, ship him out of town. This is a guy that's so important to the middle of that order, folks. You can't forget how important he is. And I know people want to be like, well, he's 34, 35 years old. Yeah, but he's a designated hitter, for Christ's sake. David Ortiz was a designated hitter, played until the age of 40. And in the age of 40, he had the best age 40 season anybody's ever had in baseball. He hit over 300, hit 38 home runs, had over 120 plus RBI. So it was ridiculous. So he's had JD Martinez I think he's on track to have one of those good late careers. Nelson Cruz has had a good late career. And the thing is, when it comes to Kyle Schwarber, yes, I would like him back. And I think if they can find a way to maybe free up an outfield spot here, maybe you put Kike Hernandez full-time at second base, you put Verdugo full-time in center, and then Hunter Renfroe out in right field, unless you want to move Hunter. Then you can put Kyle Schwarber out in left full-time. If that's what you want to do, yes, then bring back Schwarber. If you want to platoon him with at first base, and then after JD goes, then you can switch Kyle Schwarber over to DH full-time. Sure, I'm fine with that. But to me, honestly, I rather would have JD Martinez, just because he is a better all-around hitter, because Kyle Schwarber, we all forget, is a career 230, 240 hitter. This is a guy that has immense power, bashes the ball a lot, and I think people undervalue hitting for average now. They're like, oh yeah, that's just the old school baseball stat. No, it's not, folks. It's not an old school baseball stat. This is a stat that you have to pay attention to, because if you're hitting over 300, then that means you're getting on base. And then JD Martinez just isn't like, oh, I just get little slap hits into the outfield, and then I don't draw my walks. He's a guy that still draws his walks. He's got a good OBP and then OPS. So you can't just dismiss him that hitting for 300 is a overrated stat. No, it's still important, folks. You still have to be able to hit in this game. You have to hit to hit home runs. You have to hit to drive in runs. And you have to hit to get on base if you're not going to get a walk. So that's ridiculous. It's utterly stupid that people want to marginalize your batting average and to be like, oh no, I want Kyle Schwarber back and I want JD gone. No, it's like, JD is a professional hitter. He is a stud at the plate. Yeah, whatever we can talk about him hurting his ankle at second base and being a subpar fielder, sure, whatever. You can make that argument, and I'm fine with whatever you want to talk about him defensively, running the bases. But offensively, with that bat, he is an absolute stud with the bat. So you have to have him back on this team if you want to make it deeper in. If you want to actually make it to the World Series, because you lost in 6 games to those cheating Stros. I know it's not like JD was lighting the world on fire in the American League Championship Series. But I think once he's fully healthy, once he's not dealing with that ankle injury, this is a guy that obviously you're going to need him in the playoffs to go far, along with Rafael Devers, along with Xander Bogaerts, and then whoever else that you bring back with his team. So to me, that was just a big point that I was just so pissed off about, that people want to besmirch JD Martinez on, is like, oh, and don't get me wrong, I want to have Kyle Schwarber back too. To me, you have to have him back at the right price. You have to have him back in a place that fits. And I think if you're willing to put him in the outfield and move in Kike Hernandez back over to second base, where you thought that's where he was going to play this year, then I'm fine with it. But to me, I rather would have JD over Kyle if we're talking for that one spot. And then as far as Eduardo Rodriguez mentioned this off the top of the show, I'm fine if he goes. I'm fine if he stays. I would rather have him see him go just because I've seen too many. It's too much of a roller coaster dealing with Erod. But then again, he is 28 years old, so he is younger. He's gonna, so he still has some of that younger upside left in the arm. But to me, at this point in your career, this is what you are to me. You're just an inconsistent guy that has potential, that can have good seasons or it can have good stretches, but then you'll fall on your face at times where, like I said, if you can bring him, if you can work out possibly a multi-year deal, and there's a report out there that the Red Sox have reached out to him about multi-year deals, then okay, I'm fine with it. If you want to bring it back on a lower value, $14 million a year, something along those lines, because you do need pitching, and if you slot him back to your fourth or fifth guy, then that's fine. But this is a situation where the Red Sox, I want to see them spend more of their money on pitching, but I don't know if Erod is going to be that guy. That's my whole concern. Is just I don't know if I want to pay that much money to Erod, a guy that's been so inconsistent in his career that, yeah, I'll take him for my fourth or fifth guy, but I don't want to pay him an exorbitant amount of money when you already have Chris Sale, you already have Nathan Eovaldi, and then you have other guys that you're trying to decide what you want to do with Tanner Houck and with your stud out there and Garrett Whitlock in the bullpen. So it's going to be interesting to see what they want to do with this rotation. And of course, you have Nick Pivetta, who, yes, he had a rough last month or two of the season, but I still think as your the fourth or fifth guy on this staff, I think that's fine with me. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in the offseason, especially with the pitching staff, which is where I really want to see them improve, get some more solid arms, and then revamp this bullpen. So that's kind of where I stand as far as when it comes to that JD and Kyle Schwarber thing, is that I just would rather have JD come back and use that money they would on Schwarber and use it towards pitching if they can't make out a good deal between with Schwarber to come back and play maybe outfield. But we'll talk a little bit more about this here next week when we have some more time. But really, those are my main thoughts when it comes to this Red Sox offseason. Now, we'll get into a quick fantasy blitz here as we're getting 44 minutes before the start of kickoff here. So we'll give you some quick fantasy some emergency ads if you are without maybe Alvin Kamara or without one of your stud running backs right now. So for me, here's a guy that I just picked up in Ramondre Stevens. Now, I know we talked a lot about him earlier in the show for the Patriots perspective. Now, like I said, I don't think he's going to have this holy crap day, but he's going to pick up a lot of the slack that Damian Harris left there. So this is where I think Ramondre Stevens is going to get about 70 yards rushing, will get a touchdown. I think he'll catch a couple passes in the backfield for about 20 yards. So we're looking at about 90 yards of offense plus a touchdown. So especially if you're in a PPR league, that's a very solid day. So, and again, remember, these are emergency picks. So we're not talking about some stud running back you're going to pick up here that you would have had a chance to trade for or something like that. This is an emergency situation. So, hey, if you get Ramondre Stevens off waivers right now as a free agent and he does that, you got to feel good about yourself if that's what he does for you, for Ramondre Stevens in this particular game. Now, as we look to the wide receiver core, if you're in a situation like, let's say, you had Julio Jones and you just heard that Julio Jones is going on IR for 3 weeks. Well, let's look to Julio Jones's old team, the Atlanta Falcons. Now, Russell Gage has been back this will be week number 4 that he's been back since dealing with some injuries. But remember, there's no Calvin Ridley. And that's their number one wide receiver. And other than Calvin Ridley, it's pretty much kind of been You have the Cordero Patterson experiment, which has gone really well. But remember, Cordero Patterson he's a running back, he's a wide receiver, kick returner, he does all of it. So yes, he gets targets, but you don't have a pure number one wide receiver right now there in Atlanta. And then you have, I'm going to butcher it, but it's Omida Zacchaeus, the number 17 for Atlanta, who has had some good games. He had a pretty good game last week for Atlanta. But again, you're still looking for that other target. So Russell Gage, since he's been back, when he came back week 7 against Miami, he had 4 catches, 67 yards, and a touchdown. And then he did not play in that game against Carolina, but he will be active, and he was active last week against New Orleans. And against New Orleans, he had 7 catches for 64 yards. And if you're in a PPR league, that's pretty good. That's 13 points there. And then this week against Dallas. Now, yes, we know Dallas has a decent secondary, mainly with Diggs there, but the rest of the secondary, I'm not as big on. So we'll see how it goes, because you would imagine that Diggs is probably going to follow around Patterson when he's at wide receiver, maybe Zacchaeus, maybe a little bit of Gage, but there's no Julio Jones that he's going to be stuck on. So I think Russell Gage could have a pretty solid stat day where I think you could probably see another 7 catch, maybe 70, 80 yards. And I think he's good for a touchdown here today. So I think you're probably looking at a 15 to 17 point performance on the day from Russell Gage here. And if he gets a couple more receptions, you might be pushing that 20-plus mark on the day for Russell Gage. And he's a guy that is available in a lot of leagues, because he's only rostered in 28% of Yahoo leagues. So he's not a guy that's really been utilized a lot here. And then one other guy, if you want to take a stab at something here, if you're really looking for that real dart throw, would be Curtis Samuel, because he really hasn't done much this year. But this is where I think he's due for one of those blow up games, because Washington, the football team, does not have another wide receiver outside of Terry McLaurin, who in his own right is a stud. So I think this is the week where you're playing Tampa Bay, and actually he's inactive for this week, so I do apologize. So let's exit out of Curtis Samuel. So just looking, and then the other guy that I was looking at here as well is Amon-Ra St. Brown, where this is a guy that has had a few solid weeks here. He's more the slot guy. He's been steady. He's had games with 6 catches, 70 yards, 7 catches, 65, 5 for 26, 3 for 40, 46. So this is a guy where there's not a lot out there with the Browns. So if you're looking for that other, maybe a flex guy, a third wide receiver, and you're really struggling, this is somebody that I think PPR wise, I think could get you a decent amount of points, not a lot, but this is a guy where if you really in a pinch, you really need something bad, I think you could go for Amon-Ra St. Brown. But those really are my picks those are your emergency picks of the week. So if you're really struggling, you're really looking for something to help you out here in the last minute, that's where go for those guys. And if not, you might cross your fingers here, especially if you lost some of your studs and you weren't able to make up some trades. But those are the emergency picks of the week here on the Fantasy Blitz. And that will do it for this week of New England Sports Weekly. I, as always, have been your host, Sean Metcalf. And remember, as always, to follow me on Twitter or at Instagram at my handles. You can see on the screen at Sean_Met28. Or you can follow the show account on Twitter at NE Sports Weekly. Send me or the show account any questions that you have regarding anything with any New England sports topics, any fantasy questions that you have, send them my way. Love to have you on the show. As always, remember, you can interact in the live chat. And keep in tune next week as we'll break down this Browns game. And remember, next week is the Thursday night game where the Patriots play the Falcons in Atlanta on Thursday night. So it'll be a quick turnaround for the Patriots, and we'll have the show Wednesday night, break that game down as well. We'll talk some more Red Sox news here as they're into the offseason, more free agency news here, or more off-season signing news. We'll get into that as well as break down the Celtics and the Bruins in their start to the season. Until then, next week, everybody, have a good one.